We are so grateful to have someone with Van's insight and commitment to justice speaking with us today. Without further ado, Van Jones.
Well, I am seriously honored to be here. I have a lot to say. First of all, I just turned 52, which means I'm old, gifted, and Black. I'm no longer young, gifted, and Black. You can't even. There's no way around it. Once you're in your 50s, that's just it. But it makes it even more powerful for me to get a chance to talk to the people who are young, gifted, and Black, young, gifted, and brown, young, gifted, and whatever color you want to pick, who are part of this this week. And what I want to just do is to talk about what your potential is to make massive change. You may think to yourself, I got no potential to make massive change. I'm at the bottom of I'm at the lowarchy, at the bottom of the hierarchy. I'm overworked, I'm undervalued, I'm underpaid. I feel like I have no power. I look at my cell phone every day. There's some more atrocious, nonsense happening, or actual, tragedies happening. You may be feeling quite powerless in 2020. But I want to suggest that you are more powerful than you know, and that people like myself are out here trying to make change happen, trying to pass bills, trying to pass laws, are helpless without you. I can say that with some authority, in that being born in 1968, I can remember when a lot of stuff that right now you take for granted as world-changing forces were literally born. Okay, I remember, I'm just gonna take a minute because I'm old. I got privilege now. I got old folk privilege. I remember three things that will shock you. Number one, I remember when the first summer of hip hop, I remember, and I was not in the Bronx. I was in Jackson, Tennessee, being raised on the edge of a small town in rural West Tennessee. Both my parents were public school teachers. And here we are 30 years later, 35 years later, hip hop is the dominant cultural force on the earth. It's bigger than rock and roll. It's bigger than the blues, country music. It's the biggest force on earth. People in South Korea right now are rapping. That gives you a sense of what happens when young people take something and make it their own, and decide they're going to do with it what they will. I remember when computers were these big boxes in one floor at the high school where all the weirdo kids were. Now you're probably watching this on a computer, maybe a computer in your hand. Again, young people grabbed coding culture and turned it into a global force that's changed everything. And I also remember, you may see behind me, these are not books behind me, they're graphic novels, except for Mandela, who I love. The rest of them just graphic novels. I remember when you had to be a true nerd, not a fake nerd. Like, oh, I'm a superhero nerd because you went to some movies. No, if you get a chance to go to movies with all your friends and everybody, no, I was into comic books when comic books would get you a wedgie, would get you beat up for being a geek, a dork, a nerd in high school. But you had to be a true nerd to know who the X-Men were, the Avengers. That stuff was as marginal as could be. And now Marvel, it's like the Greek and Roman gods. Okay, again, young people, outsiders, taking something and making it our own. Way before Comic-Con and all that sort of stuff, we were trading comics. We were thinking up epic stories. And most of us were little, bully magnets. We were skinny little kids, getting mistreated, getting laughed at, getting shoved down the stairs, getting chased, around the gym. But we had our comic books, and that gave us our power, fantasy, and our escape. And what would we do if we ever had power? We would help people. We wouldn't be bullies. We wouldn't be terrible. We would help people. And one of the great lines in Marvel Comics, everybody knows, is with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben said that to Peter Parker before he died. With great power comes great responsibility. And that's my thing. With great power, you have great power. And now you have great responsibility. You say, man, shut up with this great power stuff. I'm broke. How did I got power and I'm broke? I get it. But I see it very differently. First of all, I'm so envious to be young and a gifted person of color today, when there is almost a commandment that you got to take this generation more seriously. It's unbelievable. We didn't have that. But your talent comes from three sources: your talent, your tribulation, and the times. Let's hit all three, and then we'll get to questions and answers in a second. But I just want to put what's on my heart out there. First of all, your talent. Understand that when I was your age, I went to law school to have an impact on the world. I was a cartoonist. I worked for the Jackson, Tennessee Sun as a communications major at the University of Tennessee at Martin. I was a graphic artist intern at the Jackson Sun, again, comic book fanatic. And so my art was everything to me. And I got a job in a newspaper being able to do graphic art and graphic design when that was new. They had something called a little beige computer in the corner called a Macintosh, where you could do graphic art and graphic designs. You can make the weather maps, make cooler headlines. And because I was so young in the newsroom, they put me over there with that crappy machine in their mind. And suddenly I had power in the newsroom. I could do real stuff. I could change the look of the newspaper. But it was one little newspaper in one little part of the world. There's no internet, there's no social media. And I wanted more. And so I went to law school. I went to Yale Law School. A lot of people are still believing that that's the way. Oh, you got to run for office. You got to go to law school. You got to get a degree. You got to do all this type of stuff. The reality is that's the old system. That's the old century. In the last century, everybody went to law school. The Kennedys went to law school. Mandela went to law school. Castro went to law school. Lenin, I think, was a lawyer. I mean, like everybody in the last century is a lawyer. Why? Because that was the power language. Law was the power language to make change. Dr. King marched on Washington, D.C. He didn't march on Wall Street. He didn't march on Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley didn't exist. He didn't march on Hollywood. He marched on D.C. because in the old way, politics was the center of everything. You are in a different century. You got to understand that. In this century, there are at least 4 centers of power and not just one. It's not just Washington, D.C., which you can see is a crap show, which you can see is a complete food fight every day of nonsense and gets worse every minute. Help is not on the way from Washington, D.C. Lord knows, I have my preference in this election, but I'm not stupid. At my age, I can tell the dysfunction there is pretty severe, and we're not one election away from fixing it. But there are other centers of power. Wall Street in New York City is a center of power. Finance, Silicon Valley in Northern California, center of power. Technology, Hollywood, media ownership, center of power. But what runs a whole bunch of that is Madison Avenue. It's the advertising and marketing industry, and that engine that powers almost the whole thing. You can't run for office without marketing and advertising. You can't do a product launch without product and advertising. You can't have a movie. You can't have a TV show. You can't launch a website or an app. At the end of the day, the actual system that you live under has an invisible power structure, and it's inside of your industry, which is where you have located yourself because of your talent. You have an ability or an affinity for storytelling, for arresting images. You have a sense around fashion, around design. You're always a little bit ahead of the trend. On trend to you is late. You are in an industry that has the ability to completely shift and change culture if it only would. Same with the law. The law for 100 years was not on the side of good people. It was on the side of the status quo. And then there was a rebellion inside of law with Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then now the law, at least sometimes, is on the side of good people. You can go through every industry, but you had to have that generation that stood up and said, we're going to use our power for good. With great power comes great responsibility. So your talent itself and where you located it or where you're trying to locate it gives you power. You're going to have to take responsibility for it. Number 2, your tribulation. You say, Van, I'm broke. My parents broke. I've gone through all this crap. My sexuality doesn't fit. My gender doesn't fit. My race doesn't fit. What are you talking about? Shut up with the power thing. I feel powerless. I'm going to tell you something that you are beginning to intuit that would be helpful for you to own. there is some power that comes out of powerlessness. There's an authority, there's an authenticity, there's some privilege that comes out of not having no privilege. If you want to follow me in that. In other words, if privilege is unearned advantage, by the way, different than success. Success is earned advantage. And sometimes we put that all in the same thing. But if privilege is unearned advantage, coming from an underprivileged background, as I did going to Yale, I actually had some advantages. Most of those kids knew what they knew because they had read a bunch of books, they had had a bunch of tutors, they had gone to a bunch of fancy schools. I went to public schools, I had no tutor. So I got there, I didn't know a bunch of stuff. I didn't know a bunch of words. I didn't know a bunch of references, but I didn't know half the time what they were talking about the first semester. They're talking about this is paradigmatic of that, and this is what the hell? But since everything they learned in a book, I could read their books and catch up. But what I knew wasn't in no book. You had to live it. You had to be a Black kid in the 70s and 80s in the rural South to know my story, to come out of my tribulations. And they could never learn that. And so I could catch up to them. They could never catch up to me. And that's true of you. That's true of everybody, but it's certainly true of you. You have a story. You have a connection to the stuff of legend, the stuff of the epic. The little engine that could, the David and Goliath, all those stories of overcoming that arrest the attention of the whole world. That is your family story. That is you. Now you may say, well, actually, Dad, I went to private schools too, but your mama didn't, your grandmama didn't. You still are connected in a way that's powerful, that's visceral to the immigrant story, the wayfarer story, the adventurer story, the refugee story, the story of the enslaved fighting for freedom. All of these stories are in you and in your network. And that's a source of real power, because the power of your industry is the power of storytelling. And you are connected, or can quickly get connected to a whole different set of stories. And lastly, it's not just your talent and your tribulations, it's the times. I never thought I would see what I saw this summer. Everybody's mad at 2020. I am too. But sometimes a breakdown can lead to a breakthrough if you use it right, if you approach it right. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that after George Floyd was brutally lynched in front of the whole world in a way that nobody could explain, that nobody could excuse, that was just a complete travesty in broad daylight with cell phones and cop cameras rolling. About 30 million white people changed their mind about race, just like that. If you had done a poll in January and said, how many white people think that racism and race is a big issue, that Black people are being mistreated by the system systematically and systemically, you'd have gotten one number, a relatively low number. And within a week, that number changed in a way that the pollsters have been shocked by and have never seen before, in terms of 20, 30 million new white people saying something bad has happened to Black folks. And for a while, even Republican numbers moved dramatically. They've drifted back now, but you can never put the toothpaste fully back in the tube. So you are now coming into a time where there are not just growing numbers of people of color, and our stories and our heroes beginning to take up more room, and more crazy rich Asians, Black Panthers. You can just go through the whole thing. And I'm here in LA, a whole revolution happening here in LA on gender and race, following a revolution that happened on LGBTQ stuff. But you're now entering a time when a whole new set of potential white allies have come online. Dr. King didn't get 20 million, 30 million new white allies in a summer. Read the actual history books. He was one of the most unpopular, hated people in America until the day he died. And then even after that, it took his wife, his widow and family 20, 30 years to be able to convince America who he was. And that's why you have, now you treat him like Ronald McDonald and his pictures everywhere, and he doesn't even matter. But he was a radical, he was a rebel, he was hated, he was murdered. He didn't get 20, 30 million new allies in a week, in a summer. So you are now in a position to do something. And I'll talk to you about, how to do it. But let me tell you, my own career is a testimony to the power you potentially have to take this industry that's been a quiet, sleepy industry. Every now and again, you do a little edgy stuff, but you could really help your agency. You could help this industry become bolder and bolder in driving the narratives and the stories and the images and the sounds that can sure sell product. You got to do that, but also shift culture. That's in your hands. That's in your ability. And I'm going to tell you right now, as somebody, look, I've gotten 4 US presidents in a row to do something I want them to do. I was a part of the youth and student movement that got Bill Clinton to close the HIV positive prison camp. I'll say it again, because you don't even believe it's possible. But George H.W. Bush had set up a prison camp for people who were HIV positive Haitian refugees at Guantanamo in the 1990s. So we had the world's first prison camp for HIV positive refugees was run by the US government at Guantanamo. I was a part of the youth and student movement that convinced Bill Clinton to close that camp and to bring those refugees to the United States. And then I got George W. Bush to sign the Green Jobs Act of 2007, which was my bill to get solar jobs to kids, urban youth all across the country. I got Barack Obama to hire me, President Obama, and I even got President Trump to sign the First Step Act, working with many other people to sign the First Step Act, which the New York Times says is the most substantial breakthrough on criminal justice in a generation. So I'm going to tell you somebody who's got, I'm not saying it's to brag, I'm trying to give you, I know what I'm talking about. I've got 4 US presidents in a row to do something that I thought was important, and I'm not a rich man's child. And most of the time I wasn't even a well-known person. How was I able to do those things? Because in the end of the day, well, I'm going to tell you something. Culture always wins. I'll say it again. Law doesn't always win. Politics doesn't always win. Justice doesn't always win. But in the end of the day, culture always wins. When I was a young rabble-rousing activist in the Bay Area, running around berserkly in Oakland, protesting and all that kind of stuff, which I'm quite proud that I did. The way we were able to close 5 abusive youth prisons in California, the way we were able to reform the San Francisco Police Department, the way that we were able to get a horrific racist cop fired back in 1997. I tell people all the time, man, you need to be more woke. I'm like, y'all, I was woke before y'all had alarm clocks. I was woke before y'all had alarm clocks. I've been fighting police, suing cops and closing prisons or whatever. But why did we win those fights in the 90s when everybody else was losing them? Because we used culture. We had an alliance with the local underground hip hop scene in the Bay Area. When we would go to the city council, we would bring all the young local rappers and spoken word artists. And we would use the public comment period to put on essentially indoor hip hop sessions for justice. And it turned out, you have some 17-year-old Filipina kid who gets up there and opens up her journal and, up from the pavement, out of our enslavement. But why the cops got to act like cavemen? TV cameras, local news crews coming around, and suddenly, the BBC, MTV putting our youth movement on the global stage, and we won almost every fight. We lost some important ones, but we won more fights than other folks were winning around the country because we understood the power of culture. It wasn't the legalistic language of the city attorney. It was that heart language of those young spoken word artists and rappers who could bring a crowd and could just shame people into doing stuff. And so, and then, you watch the Supreme Court now says anybody can get married. Based on what? Same Constitution's been there the whole time. What changed? The Constitution didn't change. Nobody passed a constitutional measure. What changed was the culture. What changed was Glee. What changed was Ellen DeGeneres. What changed was people coming out of the closet and changing the culture. And the same judges and the same justices looked at the same Constitution and saw a right and saw humanity and saw dignity in that document that nobody had seen for 200 years caused the culture change. A big part of why we were able to move President Trump is because Kim Kardashian, who people like to put down and whatever. And they forget Kim Kardashian isn't a 20-year-old celebutante anymore. She is the mom of 4 Black kids. She's the daughter of one of our, most powerful LA attorneys. And she's somebody who gives a damn. And she's used her platform marvelously. She's got 122 million Instagram followers. She moves the culture. She's got more Instagram followers than a lot of prime ministers have citizens. She moves the culture, and she put that cultural power on the table to help Black folk and brown folk and poor folk behind bars and in prisons. And it wasn't a one-time PR stunt. She's been doing that for 3 years. And there are literally hundreds and thousands of people who are out of prison because of Kim Kardashian. But did Kim, was there some new law on the books that Kim was able to appeal to when she talked to President Trump? No. But that cultural force, also even myself, my organization has helped to pass, you look at the Dream Corps, 18 bipartisan criminal justice bills in the past 33 months, 18, including in states like Georgia, where we got 100% of the state legislature in Georgia to sign on to dignity for incarcerated women. Women get left out of the criminal justice discussion. We put it front and center of the Dream Corps, Cut 50. And we got dignity for incarcerated women. That bill to make sure you can't shackle women when they're giving birth to babies and the babies the children have to be closer to the mom. All these rights that women have been denied for 100 years in prisons. There are now 40% of all women locked up in the US anywhere have new rights that they didn't have before because of our campaign around dignity for incarcerated women. Well, how did you win that fight? Alicia Keys, Common, people who moved the culture got involved and accelerated what we were doing. And we were making beautiful ads and spots, whatever, with putting those kind of things. Right now, working with Jay-Z and Meek Mill are the real magnet for the Reform Alliance. I'm the CEO. I helped to run the staff. But when I pick up the phone, I say Van Jones, they say whatever. If I say Jay-Z, everybody call. Culture always wins. Culture always wins. And I'm throwing out celebrity names, but you don't have to be a celebrity. It wasn't a celebrity that helped to move the LGBTQ conversation along by herself. Ellen DeGeneres was there, but you had literally thousands of people who just made a decision that we are going to start putting these images into ads. We're going to start putting these storylines into sitcoms and into dramas, and we're going to stop hiding what's right and what's true and what's beautiful and what's real. And it worked. It changed the law because you changed the culture, and people made more money. So in conclusion, let me just say to you this. You are born for this time. I know it's rough. I can't imagine being your age and, a pandemic and California burning down and so many hurricanes, they had to start using Greek names. They were now in Hurricane Beta because they ran out of the actual alphabet. And June 22nd, it was 100 degrees at the North Pole, 100 degrees. 100 degrees. It was hotter at the North Pole than it was in the Sahara. Somebody said, I don't know if that's true, but 100 degrees is 100 degrees. That's nuts. And then, I'll tell you about this, what's going on politically. I don't know. I mean, if I were 25, half my age, 26, I don't know how I would make sense of all this stuff. But what I will say to you is this: no pressure, no diamonds. No pressure, no diamonds. Out of all of this consternation and confusion and breakdown, breakthroughs are possible. You can say stuff and propose stuff and suggest stuff that would have gotten you laughed out of a room or even fired 3 years ago, that people will lean forward and say, you know what, that's actually That's actually really something. In other words, everybody is more connected now to these struggles. They're more connected now to the fragility of life. They're more connected now to the perilous nature of reality. And frankly, if you're a person of color connected to our communities, you've been connected. You might be more connected than you want to be now because of COVID and everything else, but you've been connected. You have a head start. You got an advantage on being able to pull and coax out different stories and narratives and approaches and insights and things. And authenticity matters. People talk about representation matters. Representation matters a little bit. But if you got somebody who is just, all skin folk ain't kin folk, if they just look the part, but they aren't connected to the community, and it's not in their heart to raise their hand one more time and to ask one more question, or to hold it in the meeting, because the meeting may not be the right place to do it, but then to sneak up to the manager at the so-called water cooler, or to hit them on the chat and continue to advocate. If you're not willing to be authentic in bringing forward something new, well, then representation can just be tokenism. But authenticity matters everywhere. Authenticity, because that's the core of culture. Culture comes out of, this is who I am, this is what I see, this is what I'm about, this is how we do it, this is what's going on. Culture comes out of an authentic connection and expression. And even if you are alienated from your culture, that's authentic too. Those blurs and stuff like me, we didn't even have a name called Blur. We were just called dorks and geeks, and but that's authentic too. But it's the authenticity that you can bring to an industry that's all too often sterile and corny, and it's just frankly disconnected. But the key now for markets, these brands, for them to break through is for them to be connected to authentic movements, authentic shifts, which are harder and harder to track because of how disaggregated everything is, and everybody's algorithm pushing them in different directions. And so you have great power. You have great potential power because of your talent, because of your own tribulations, and because of the times. And I hope that you will use your great power responsibly. Thank you.
Van, that was phenomenal. Thank you for getting this conference started on that note. And so we have some questions from our live audience that I want to share with you. So someone has asked, is it enough to make cultural change through creative storytelling, or must we also be strategically involved in the dealings of the law?
Well, listen, it's not enough. The culture by itself is not enough. But number one, please understand, the laws won't change unless the culture changes, and the laws won't matter unless the culture changes. And so that's why I say culture always wins. If you look at the LGBTQ movement, the culture changed first. Hollywood changed first. Madison Avenue changed first, and then suddenly you could get, you could go from civil unions to, marriage equality on some of these ballot measures and that type of stuff. You begin, and then the Supreme Court moved. And now you've got to reinforce with, on the cultural side again, we're talking about trans issues and other stuff. So there's a call and response, as we say in the Black community, between culture and law, between culture and politics, between what's right and what's legal, between what's right and what's required. And culture leads. Even the civil rights movement. Try to take Mahalia Jackson out. Try to take gospel music out of the civil rights movement. Ain't nobody walking out of no church to get beat up by, police and dogs sicked on them and fire hoses put on them, based on an intellectual, recitation of the law. Nobody stood up in front of a church full of Black folk about to go get beat and read the law. They sang Jesus songs. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, and infuse the movement with culture and spirituality and meaning and purpose. And then went out there, and that spirit overcame guns, overcame lynch ropes, overcame dogs, and changed the world forever. So you cannot get away from the need for culture, and for, frankly, our cultures, Black, brown, Native American, Asian cultures. The authenticity of that has a power that can change law and then make law matter So, and I'm saying as a political professional who can't sing a lick and hadn't drawn nothing for 20 years, I'm telling you, don't underestimate the power of one advertisement that you fight for to get your client to adopt. They could get out there and change, the conversation as much as anything I can do in Congress or state legislature.
So during your talk, you talked a lot about culture, American laws. Someone submitted a question that said, what if you are Black but not living in America and you want to get involved in these issues?
Well, shoot, we got issues everywhere. I mean, wherever you are, you can make a difference. I'm going to tell you something. Nothing good happens to Black people by accident, period. Nothing good happens to any oppressed people by accident. It takes strategy. It takes work. It takes cunning. It takes skill. It takes excellence. It takes persistence. And so wherever you are, and even if you're not Black, whatever, I know you got people of all colors watching this. Wherever you are, this fight is real, and you can make a difference. And it doesn't always have to come down to the United States or come down to legal stuff. There's stuff happening in your office. There's stuff happening in your apartment building. There's stuff happening in your house of worship, in your family, that might need an intervention. And so you can always make a difference.
Sounds good. And so you spoke about Kim earlier. Someone asked, what do you think about Kanye running for president?
I wish he were not running for president. That's what I think about that. I love Kanye, and I'm close to Kim, very close, because we worked in the trenches together. I'm also, I wouldn't say I'm super close to Kanye, but he returns my phone calls and I return his. And he's a brilliant brother. I love him to death. I love what he's doing in terms of gospel music and everything like that. I just think he should leave politicians to politicians. He should leave politics to politicians.
All right. Well, there's your answer, folks. Someone asked, how do we get to a spot where we have power, and how do we get those opportunities?
Okay, so this is a more serious question. Look, it's not easy. It's not easy. You have two dangers. First is you never get on. Second is you get on and you get tokenized, and they give you little stuff that you think is valuable that's not. I spent a lot of my career going on stages and being the most inspiring speaker and getting a lot of applauses and getting a lot of awards and recognition, not getting any money, right? I would be at conferences where I didn't know what was going on because I was just so happy to be invited and to have my plane ticket paid for and the hotel paid for and some free food. And I didn't understand there were billion-dollar deals happening at those conferences sometimes. That I was not, they didn't invite me to those rooms. They saw me in a decorative way. They saw me almost as a minstrel, kind of like a Black social justice minstrel who's just going to come and inspire everybody and then go home. And I was in my late 40s where I figured out that was a scam. I thought I was winning. So power is not an easy thing to figure out. You're always learning. Which is not to say that I shouldn't have done all those gigs. That's why I'm talking to you. I did those gigs. That got me to a position. But then what's the next move? And then what's the next move? And then what's the next move? And what I would say is it's things that don't go together that get you in a position of power. On the one hand, you have to be excellent. I'm sorry, you do. And you have to be more excellent than everybody else and 10 times more excellent than the white folks. And if nobody's told you that, I'm telling you that. You have to be 10 times more excellent than the white folk in 2020. And that's not fair. Well, then, look, don't play the game then. That's the game. You got one strike and they got 10 strikes. And then they're going to tell you, well, look at the scoreboard, we're winning. Well, yeah, you're winning. You got the 10 strike policy. I got a 1 strike policy. But that's the game. If you want to play it, that's the game. Quit. You can change the rules for somebody behind you when you have some power. But right now, that's the game. So you have to outwork everybody. You do. It's not fair. You do. I don't want to hear it. I can't tell you what my day looks like. At 52, I got to outwork everybody. Okay, so that's real. On the other hand, that don't matter. At the same time, Negroes will believe that if we just work hard, you know what I mean, and show up, that somehow it's all gonna work out. And it's not. That's just the table stakes to get you into the game, to get some power. The actual power comes from, as your grandma been trying to tell you the whole time, it's not what you know, it's who you know. How many times has grandma told you that? How many times has auntie told you that? How many times your uncle told you that? And you say, yeah, but I'm in these books. Good for you. I'm working my craft. Good for you. You have to do that. But also finding people who are very different from you. Your talent and your point of view comes from the singularity of who you are and the originality of you. Well, look, my dad is from Jamaica and my mom is from Ireland and all this crazy stuff that gives you your particular perspective, your particular take, your particular thing. And yet that is absolutely essential and ain't good enough. Then you also have to marry that with your network is unbelievable. You got old white conservative guys on your side who can teach you about the business side of things. Who can teach you about real estate. Who can teach you about the stock market. Who can teach you just about how things actually work. I guarantee you, if you're at an advertising agency or any kind of marketing firm or anything like that, there are whole groups and clubs that your white allies know about and are trying to get into that they've never told you exist. Never told you exist. So there's a whole other game of power that's not just about excellence. It's about what we used to call the Rolodex. The Rolodex, your network. Your network is your net worth. People say these little platitudes and stuff. They don't know. That's very true. And so you say, well, hold on a second, man. You asking me to do stuff that's too hard. I got to be excellent and original, and I got to deal with a whole bunch of people who are not like me and who may not like me and get them on my side too. That's too hard. Well, that's why we ain't got no power. That's just how it is. That's how it be. And so then what happens is, as you start trying to figure out, okay, how did this person get promoted? How much did this cost and who paid for it? What does this person do on the weekends? What? And you start figuring out, then you start getting called all kinds of names by your people. Because they start seeing you over here trying to play other games and make other moves. Now they're calling your authenticity card into question. That's why it's so hard for us to get anywhere. To keep your authenticity card, you have to stay powerless. To get some power, you may have to let your authenticity be challenged sometimes by people. It happens to me all the time. For instance, I work in criminal justice. People understand. Most Black people are locked up, not in Berkeley, California, not in Brooklyn, where everybody's cool. They're locked up in red states. They're locked up in Mississippi. They're locked up in Alabama. They're locked up in Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, where you have Republicans running everything from dog catcher to governor. If I'm gonna get people out of prison, I gotta deal with Republicans. I can't be on TV all day saying all Republicans are terrible, blah, 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 blah. Because then when I get off TV and pick up the phone and try to get your cousin out of prison, nobody's returning my phone call. And so you begin to have to so it's hard, man. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard. But study people who did it. Study the greats, study Robert Smith, study Oprah, study people who did. Now, your whole, you won't be able to match what they did because of the different system you're in now, media-wise, fancy-wise, everything else. But if you want to be somebody who's in a position to green light things, as we say in Hollywood, to be the person who says yes or no, this movie can go, this movie can't go. This ad is approved, it's not approved. If you want to have that kind of power, it is a journey. And the key to it is to be the best, period, to be excellent, but also to have the most unlikely network. And I'll tell you, the last thing I'll say on this is very important. When somebody's serious and they want to know this stuff. And I'm in my 50s, I'm just now learning this stuff. They don't teach us this stuff. But there's something happening with quote unquote identity politics that is half good and half bad. We have to begin with the end in mind in dealing with white folks. What do we actually want in the end? Do we want a pity party being thrown in our honor, where they're giving us these one-time guilt grants, where they're giving us these one-time promotions that are going to turn into a termination in 18 months anyway? Do we want a pity party? Do we want pity or do we want partnership? See, partnership is different. See, I don't want pity. I can tell my sad story for my family just like you can, but I want partnership. That's different. I want to work with white folk and Black folk and Latino folks who know how to partner authentically across difference. That's not diversity. That's not inclusion. First of all, we have to fight for diversity and inclusion because but behind the door, us talking. Sometimes diversity is an opportunity for tokens to get an advantage, not necessarily people who really trying to make something happen. So we have to be clear. We don't want a diverse set of assholes who don't care about anybody in charge. That's not what we want. There's something else we want. We want the ability to partner authentically across difference. And partnership means I show up with my stuff that's valued and is valuable, and so do you. If you're white, you might be able to bring some financial capital to the table that we don't have in the hood. God bless you. I want to respect that. But we're going to bring some cool capital, some spiritual capital, some cultural capital that you don't have and are not going to have in your hood. Now, we need to be able to have a fair and equitable exchange. You don't need to, and when we get done, you should be a little bit cooler and we should be a little bit richer. Okay? I'm tired of us still being on the plantation where our value gets extracted, our spiritual value gets extracted, our cultural value gets extracted, our artistic value gets extracted to make somebody else more money, and we still broke it on a hamster wheel while no, that's the end of that. We want fair and equitable exchange and authentic partnership where I can respect what you bring, you respect what I bring, you win more, I win more. That's not pity, that's not exploitation. And so how we get there, man, I don't know. But that's got to be the goal. And, you know, this is something I'm obsessed with because to be in my 50s and just now to be learning basic stuff, I'm gonna rant a little bit longer because this is really important. I'm just now learning basic stuff in my 50s. For instance, with the identity politics, which is what I've been, you know, Black folk, black. It's, are you like me? Are you Black like me? Are you gay like me? Are you like me? And then we can start from there. But there's a different level of the game that is, do you like me? See, the people in power, of course, they would want people who are like them, but they also will make an exception for people who do like them, who respect them, who say, listen, you might have voted for Trump and I might have voted for, you know, Bernie, but I respect you. I see your hustle. I see what you're trying to do. I disagree with you politically, but I respect you personally and I want to learn from you. Really? Well, nobody's ever said that to me before. Well, I'm saying it to you. How did you do that? Where are you from? What are your kids doing? What'd your mama do? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I think this Negro likes me. And now you actually have the ability to start learning and exchanging, you know, even with people you profoundly disagree with. You will never have power based only on the people who look just like you. You won't have enough to get it done. You can have a good business, you can have a good life, you can do it. But if you want to change all this crap out here, if you want to make it possible for somebody else's child and their child and their child, there's not enough, you know, straight Black old dudes like me to get it done by ourselves. I'm gonna have to work with somebody who doesn't look like me. And that's the mix, the authenticity and the network.
Right. So someone asked, have you seen Queen and Slim? Any thoughts on the film? Because Slim mentions how Black people shouldn't have to be excellent. They should have the choice to just be people. What are your thoughts?
That's a great movie. I love the movie. He wrong. Because I don't live on planet should. I shouldn't even have to have this conversation. We shouldn't have to have this conference. We shouldn't have to have it. We should just be able to go about our lives. But we have a lot of people who are smart and not wise. That's a smart thing to say. It's not a wise thing to say because nothing good happens for Black people by accident. It takes more strategy. It takes more excellence. It takes more determination. That's how you know you're still oppressed.
And so just for clarification, are you saying Black people can come to work as they are, natural hair, what have you, but if their work product is excellent, they will get into those positions of power or those circles of power? Or what is your stance on that?
I'm saying that the more authentic your expression is, the more mastery you have to have
Mm.
of the game, right? You have to earn your attitude, put it that way. So I had, look, I had dreadlocks like you. I didn't cut them, they cut me. It's called male pattern baldness. I didn't want to look like Bozo the Dread Man. So, but you have to, what I would say is earn your attitude. If you want to be all of that and the whole deal, then your shit better be awesome, because that will unsettle some people at first. And they rather go with somebody who's a more vanilla version of you, a more watered down version of you. It might make them feel more comfortable. So what I would say is three things. Being authentic and being real about it is a key. Being excellent is a key. So nobody can say, well, she's authentic, but her work sucks. And then it's that third element of knowing how to build a network of support among your own people and among other people. Those are the three keys: authentic, excellence, and well-connected. That well-connected part is hard, because you can know people and think that they're betting on you, and they're giving you 2%, and they're giving the white person 50% behind the scenes. And you don't even know. That's the thing, is you don't even know. We don't know what we don't know. And that's why we get to drive us crazy, because we're watching people making moves that we don't understand.
All right. And speaking of that, someone has a question about how do you find mentors? How do you find these connections? They're saying it's particularly hard these days where a lot of folks are working remotely. So what is your advice?
Hey, look, that's tough, and I don't have a great answer, because I came up, pre-COVID. But what I would say is knowing that that's what you want, and think about it from this point of view. What would you want from a mentoree? Make sure that you're prepared to be a good mentoree. In other words, somebody tells you read a book, read the book. Don't buy the book or download it on Kindle and not read it. Jonathan, you might need to mute. Thanks. Be respectful. Also, people who are in position of power have needs. They want to feel respected. They want to feel like their old stories matter, and stuff like that. Be a listener. Be willing to be in somebody's life and be supportive and stuff like that. But you're asking the right question, and there's not an easy answer.
Okay. And to go back, because there's a lot of conversation around this, what tactics can you share about creating advocacy in the white people you encounter?
Mm-hmm. Well, everything starts with relationship. So, it's hard to move somebody who they don't know you and you don't know them. But what I would say is that the more socially relevant content you produce, the more likely it is to be viral, the more likely it is to make money for your client. You want to be able to argue on two levels. I'm trying to make you more money. In other words, I'm not just going to argue about my values. I'm going to argue about what's valuable. That's when you're winning, when you're double tracking at all times. I want to make this agency a ton of money. I want to make you a ton of money. I want to make myself a ton of money. I want awards. I want honors. I want all that. And I've got this cause. I got my eyeball on this cause around women, around the earth, around Black folk, around young people, around literacy, around whatever it is, that I believe if we weigh in on that, we can make a difference in the world. We can make change, and we can make money. If you can have that conversation inside a corporate context, you can actually become somebody who rises, because you're bringing in new narrative, new stories, new ideas, but you're also meeting that bottom line. Don't be the person who's in there talking about, the world and racism and sexism and not talking about money, because unless you're working for a non-for-profit or the government, somebody there is eventually going to say, and how do we make money? If you can answer both questions, or at least if you're asking both questions, you're going to be all right.
So it seems like one of the key points of your talk is culture. And so someone asks, is culture the reason Trump is president? Does America have two or more competing cultures?
Yes. And the understanding that Trump is primarily a cultural leader is the most important thing that you can understand about Trump. He's leading a cultural movement of people who feel that as 55-year-old straight white dudes, they can't fit in with what we're building. They have no place. And so when we started talking about the left-handed transgender immigrants or whatever, they feel like, not me. And so part of the mastery of your generation will be making everybody fit in for real. Like you may wind up being the person who says, oh, wait, I want some white dudes in here with a baseball cap on, you know, because I do want everybody to feel like, and they may say, what? I didn't expect that from you. But if you're beginning with the end in mind, if the end in mind is you want these people to stop rebelling and leave this rebel Trump culture and be a part of this more positive, all-American, all-human culture, you have to create some on-ramps for them. You can't tell somebody you suck, vote for me. You're an ignorant bigot and I hate you, but do what I say. That doesn't work. You got to call people up and call people in if you want them on your side. And so to tell those Trump folks, hey guys, you got American kids over here that need you. They may be Black, they may be brown, they may be some other color, but didn't you start a business? Didn't you learn a trade? Didn't you raise a family? I can put you in a car in 20 minutes and you got American kids going to bed hungry. Where are you? Aren't you a patriotic person? Are you going to teach any of these new Americans anything? We need you over here. Come, help, be a part. People, liberals, oh my God, but they're racist and I hate them. Well, then fine. Then you're just going to be in a civil war. But culturally, you can create a cultural permission structure for them to be part of it. You can show them doing a little TikTok dance with us. You know what I mean? You can mess with the whole thing in one ad. You know, and your ad, I guarantee you, will be better than any politician's ad. So yes, he is leading a cultural movement, but you can a countercultural movement. He's a counterculture to you. He's a counter to your culture. So you need to start creating opportunities for people to jump the fence and come to your party and leave his little stale barbecue with bad potato salad, you know, alone.
So we literally have about a minute and a half left. Do you want to say final words to the audience or do you want to take one last question quickly?
One last question.
All right. If culture can change, shouldn't the Constitution also be easier to change?
Well, I will say that when we have enough power to change it. But right now, I like the fact the Constitution is hard to change because we don't have a lot of power. And if you left it right, I mean, here in California, we can pass a ballot measure any day and change everything. And a lot of times in the 90s, my experience was direct democracy was against us. It was direct democracy that, took away affirmative action, attacked immigrants, all that type of stuff. So I like it being, I don't want them just to be able to just go and just change it tomorrow. Also, I think inside of our Constitution, we can do a lot. We just need to recognize that your generation in particular is going to govern. You are going to govern. Nelson Mandela is always looking over my shoulder. He told the young people of his time, don't just prepare to protest. Don't just prepare to critique. Prepare to govern. You are going to be responsible for all these people, including the white folk. These white folk who are out here who you're calling racist, in 10 years or 20 years, you are going to be responsible for their health care and you're going to be responsible for them and their nursing homes too. So your time is coming. And so my prayer to you is prepare to govern. Recognize that you are going to lead this country. You're going to lead this whole world. Your generation is. And that's great power. And as I said, I hope you'll use it with great responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Van, for doing this talk. You were amazing. And thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned for the rest of the Where Are the Black People programming.